So, on the topic of favorite cards and broken cards over the course of history, we're going to be talking about my top 5 favorite cards that are currently forbidden in the TCG metagame. Now, some of these cards I think could come back, while others I don't think they can come back ever. And let's get right into it. First off, at number 5, we have Samorg, Bird of Sovereignty. I am a huge fan of Winged Beast monsters, or just avians in general, because I've always been interested in how they fly and how the birds are even formed. Now, Samorg is also another one of my favorite archetypes next to Hazy Flame and Orcust, which I've already covered both in a video, which, in my opinion, I really hope you guys both enjoyed. Now, Samorg is banned only because of Lyreless Tri-Brigade being a deck back in 2021. It has been that long since this card has been banned, and I feel old. But this is a card that I've always loved it in using in other decks, even in specifically pure Samorg. I was super excited that Samorg got support last year. And honestly, I think that this card can come back, even though it summons out things like Apex Avian, but luckily we don't have Barry Statue of the Stormwinds anymore. But this card also does break a few instances of Winged Beast monsters summoning from deck, so that's one thing to definitely watch out for. Next up, we have Magispector Unicorn Kieran. I can admit I was a Magispector player. This deck was a lot of fun, even though your opponent couldn't target any of your cards, or you couldn't even destroy any of your cards by card effects, so that was pretty nice for that aspect. They were legit effect pendulum monsters with no pendulum effects. They definitely utilize things like the Draco Slayers very well. I might have to go back to them now because Draco Face-Off is back at 3, but honestly, Magispector Unicorn Kern is one of the cards that definitely is locked up for a long time because of what it did, since it was played in things like Draco Pal to even stuff like Metal Foes and Metal Foes Yangzing, or even Metal Foe True King, because Metal Foes had so many variants. I remember playing Metal Foes, I remember playing Bunbuku with Kieran. Those were wonderful times back in 2017, and honestly, I feel like Magispector Unicorn Kieran could definitely come back to 1 because it feels like it's a one-off pendulum monster that people would enjoy having back in the game, even though tons of people hate the card because of what it does. Targeting a pendulum monster in your monster zone and one monster your opponent controls and putting them back to the hand, it's interruption, sure, but we have way more powerful interruption now than what we have, and we also have non-targeting effects, so there's that to stack on top of it. After that, we have my number 3, Ib, the World Chalice Justiciar, or Miko, as what the OCG had it. Now, Ib, the World Chalice Justiciar is one of my favorite synchro monsters in the game, not only because of what it does, supporting World Chalice, it's also the lore that's behind it. It's in the World Legacy lore, which I really, really love. And having this card being on the Forbidden Unlimited list after just being out for 9 months it's very insane to me because of how powerful it is. It can treat a World Chalice normal monster as a tuner. This was really one of the first monster substitution as tuner that there was in the game. Then it's also, if this card is Synchro Summon, you add 1 World Legacy card from your deck to your hand, either World Legacy Guard Dragon, World Legacy Secession, or Sorrow, or even some of the Mech Knight ones like World Legacy Secrets. So you had many search targets for this card. And if this Synchro Summon card was sent from the field to the graveyard, you could special summon 1 World Chalice monster from your deck or your graveyard, except this card. So it was able to extend into something like World Legacy Guard Dragon for Dragon Link. Now, would this card see play in current modern of the game? I would say yes, because of how powerful the card actually is. If you take a look at it, it's a 1 step up above Denlong, because Denlong you can only summon once per turn. It is locked into specifically worms, but this gets you a reborn of multiple different varieties. It also gets you another replacement monster that's a dragon that you could just utilize it for anything. Sure, Denlong can do the same thing, but this card gets a revive search instead of a draw shuffle 3 back, draw, or a counter trap. This can get a counter trap, a draw spell, or even whatever you really need for the certain situation. After that, even though I didn't really give much of an explanation, this card cannot come back though because of how much powerful it is. It could see the light of day probably in the future, but as of right now, I feel like it would be safer to have it on the ban list at 0 instead of being at 1. Next up, we have everyone's most hated card being Block Dragon. I was playing this card back in 2017, 2018 when Goki Gumblar, or pre-Goki Gumblar, was a thing where I was playing Goki Link Spam, being able to link your opponent with an Echeria Beast on the field with a Trigate, Negate, Firewall Dragon, Nightmare Unicorn, or no, Cerberus, Phoenix, Mermaid, Link Kribo, and so many other cards just being able to be used. This card was absolutely broken because you got to grab things like Doki Doki, Gigantes, whatever extender you needed, because Doki Doki, you can grab 2 of those and a Gigantes, so you could summon it off a Firewall, so you can just discard the Doki Doki to summon out a level 2 tuner, that's a rock, or another Doki Doki, so you can link away those into something else, banish the Doki Doki, summon out Gigantes, so you have another extender, and then you can just summon this back for another extender, and it's very, very broken of a card. It definitely deserves being on the Forbidden Limited list because of what it does. Being able to add 3 rock monsters from your deck to your hand whose total level equals 8. Now you can expect how I was in 2020 when Adamantimators were released, as I had a whole entire string of videos just me doing day 1, after banlist, after this set came out, Eternity Code, then after the banlist again. And then I stopped because they banned the card, which I feel like that they could have put it to 1 at first, then ban it. But honestly, I didn't get any play with this card in 2020 at all. And I kind of want it back just for that reason, so people can play it for a format 2 to see what happens. Now, outside of that, the final card is a card that you guys all should be very familiar with on this channel, because it is one of my favorite decks next to things like Hazy Flame and World Legacy and Samorg. Orcust Harp Horror. Orcust Harp Horror is part of my favorite archetype from the World Legacy lore. Funny that 2 cards from the World Legacy lore are on this, but this card is currently still forbidden in the TCG while it's at 3 in the OCG and Master Duel, and it is able just to get any of your Orcust monsters out from your deck, but it locks you into Dark monsters, and you can only use the effect once per turn. This card is one of the more tame cards next to the other 4. Well, Kieran is also tame, because this locks you into a attribute. It also only can summon Orcust monsters, so there's not really much that is going for. I've heard that people from OCG, TCG, even Konami want this card back, but it's all just being stopped because some people at Konami have a fear of Tearlament Orcust, which honestly just hit Tearlament because that deck's going to be more of a problem. And honestly, Orcust Harp Horror, I really would like to see come back after being on the Forbidden Limited list since January 2020. I've been counting the days ever since it's been banned just for it to come back. I really hope that in October this card does come back, because Sky Strikers just got multi-roll to 3 and engaged to 2. Salamangreats are going to get Gazelle probably peeled off the list too because the Fire Duelist pack. Who knows? Thunder Dragon Colossus could come back at this rate, because right now Sky Strikers, the best deck looking right now from the era of 2019-2018, with almost all their cards again legal outside of Engage, Missing a Copy, and Hornet Drones at 1. But I want to know what you guys' top 5 banned cards on the Forbidden Limited list. These were mine. But anyways, I've been Bolt Spider. See you guys in the next video, and goodbye.